Late season soybean weed control has always been a big challenge. Once the flower comes out,
oh, come on.
You gotta be kind of nervous.
It hasn't been that big of a challenge. You've been spraying Roundup, okay? So Roundup killed the first flush of weeds, and maybe it killed the second flush of weeds, but you've got another flush of weeds out there. Just go spray some more Roundup.
Well, what if Roundup doesn't work anymore, Brand? That's the big thing. You get into Palmer pigweed, you get into tall water hemp, giant ragweed. There's all these weeds now that the Roundup just isn't working.
Well,
what do you do late season?
It's not only that, but the limit in crop is 64 ounces of Power Max or Weather Max. So if you sprayed 22 ounces twice already, that's 44. So you only have 20 ounces left. Otherwise, you're going to be off label. That's illegal. So you can't use more than 64 ounces of Power Max or Weather Max during a growing season. So, I mean, like on our farm, we'll go out with a 20 ounce or 22 ounce application of Roundup, whatever we happen to have left, that's fine, but you might need a tank mix partner. Now, one of the weeds I wanted to mention before we get into the broadleaves though, is make sure you're controlling your volunteer corn. Okay, don't let some volunteer corn plants grow up. That's not a good thing. Volunteer corn, weed for weed, is the worst yield robber there is in soybeans, and it's also the least expensive weed to control. It's so inexpensive now, it'll cost you $2 or $3 an acre. Get the volunteer corn under control. Now let's talk about broadleaves.
All right. Well, with broadleaf weeds, many of them are becoming Roundup resistant, and that's getting to be the real challenge. The other thing is, what product are you going to use to actually kill them? I got to go last year into Arkansas right in the mid-season when it was nice and toasty, Brian, and we got to look at some pigweed that, wow, once it gets big, it's about impossible to bring down. You cannot let weeds get big. But let's just say that you get a late flush and they're in that 2-inch to maybe 6 inches on the high side. What options have you got?
Flexstar is the way to go, especially that Flexstar GT. It seems like you get a little bit less leaf burn there. But the problem is you can only spray that once during a growing season. So if you already sprayed that, well, you can't spray that anymore. Just keep that in mind. Then you may end up with some carryover issues. Once per season is it with the Flexstar.
You've got your rotational restrictions as far as what crop you can rotate to. You've got to consider that. If you're making a very late season application, especially as you move further north, you don't have a whole lot of growing season left. And say you have a 10 or 12 month rotational restriction, now all of a sudden you couldn't plant that next crop next year. So you have to be real fussy about what those are. And again, you also have to look at the pre-harvest interval. There are restrictions with all of these products with how close to harvest you can spray them.
Yeah, but we're not worried about that. We're going to harvest the 1st of October, okay? It's July. We got plenty of time. I wouldn't worry about pre-harvest with any of these things. What I'm more concerned about is, can we kill the weeds? So like I say, if you've already done your Flexstar, now you got to come with COBRA. Now there are some guys who will say, well, Cadet is okay, or Resource is okay on water hemp or pigweeds, but they're not that great. And you've really got to spray those things when they're small. Remember that water hemp or Palmer pigweed can grow 3 to 4 inches in a day. And the maximum label height with a lot of these products is 4 to 6 inches. So literally, we're talking just a few days worth of growth and you're beyond that stage.
All right, let's look at some specific weeds. Wild buckwheat, what do you do?
I would go Pursuit. If you still have that Flexstar, that's not too bad on it either.
Okay, how about giant ragweed and common ragweed?
First rate is the best thing by far.
Okay, how about some late sunflowers?
Sunflowers, just about anything. First rate's probably the best thing. Classic or even some Harmony SG would be good.
But what about black nightshade?
That's where Pursuit is the best. Flexstar, if you hadn't used it yet this season, is okay.
And Lambsquarters is the final one.
Yep, Harmony SG, definitely the best thing there. So with all these though, keep in mind, a high rate of Roundup would probably be good too, but if you're already worried about bumping up into that 64 ounces total usage in crop, you can't bump the rate of the Roundup. You've got to throw in a tank mix partner.
Well, late season weed control on soybeans is important, but we didn't talk about our weed of the week. We'll show you how to control that one coming up next.